I'd like to introduce our lunchtime keynote speaker to you. Randy Oostra is the co-chairman for the 22nd Century Committee. The 22nd Century Committee is a coalition of business, government, union, and education leaders aimed at revitalizing downtown Toledo. It's a private-public partnership designed to elevate our city. Randy is also the president and chief executive officer for ProMedica Health System. Prior to his position as president, Randy was the chief operating officer, regional president, and corporate vice president of strategic business development for ProMedica. Through Randy's leadership, ProMedica recently announced that their headquarters would be moving to downtown Toledo into the old steam plant and Key Bank buildings. Randy received his doctorate in management from Case Western Reserve University, master's degree in healthcare administration from University of Minnesota, master's degree in management from the University of Wisconsin, and Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Northwestern College. It is an honor and a pleasure to present Randy Oostra.
Well, good afternoon. Keep eating. I have 3 sons, so I'm used to people eating and not making eye contact, but if you could look up occasionally and look confused, that would help me, remind me of my 3 boys. So what I want to do today is talk about 3 things, and I'm going to kind of put them together. I'm going to talk a little bit about a view of healthcare, and a little bit about our project, a little bit about what makes communities great, and try to tie it all together with the 22nd century. And would have you think for a minute, as you sit and just think about our community, what makes a great community? If you had it's a class and you had to write a little short essay today, and you would have to write down how you would define a great community, think for a minute about what that would be. So you all think of communities that are great, and as you think about those great communities, also think about how do you create it and who's responsible. So many times, we talk about different communities, and we say, boy, isn't that a great community? Isn't that a cool community? I wish we were like that community. And then you ask yourself, well, if we want to be that, how's that going to happen? So if we, talk about it and think long enough about it, maybe we can. I want to start with a model of healthcare, and I'll tie this back together. And I want you to think a little bit about people's overall health and well-being, because an individual's health and well-being has a lot to do with healthy communities. So if you look at the middle of this chart, it talks about healthy communities and healthy people. And so this notion is, how do you create that? Well, if you look at your own individual health and well-being, actually the amount of your health that's really involved with the healthcare community is really only about 15%. And that's logical. I mean, most of you probably didn't go to a doctor this week or went to a hospital this week, hopefully not. And so normally that's not part of your life. That's not part of your overall health and well-being. When you look at your genetics make up about 25% of your health. Some of you are going to be predisposed because of your genetic makeup to who you are and what you've inherited from your parents. But really, it's the social determinants of health that really make up your health, and that's almost 60% of your health has to do with social conditions. So when we think about communities and we think about making communities better, it really starts in a lot of fundamental ways with those social determinants of health. And what are they? Well, it is where you grew up, the house that you lived in, your parents. Did you get a job? Were you in a gang? Did you take drugs? Did you get an opportunity to be mentored and get those opportunities in life? Those social conditions have a lot more to do with how you will turn out in life and how you will turn out as a community than the things that you would think about in health. So if I asked you, what are the bottom 2 states for infant mortality in the United States? That's children who die in their first year of life. Bottom 2 states. Mississippi is what you would normally think of, and I think they are 50th. Ohio is 49th. So more children die in their first year of life in the state of Ohio than any other state. For African Americans, we are 50th. So you have to think about that for a little bit. Why in the heck would Ohio be 49th or 50th for infant mortality? And there are a lot of reasons for it, but it goes back, a lot of it, to the social determinants of health and people's individual health in their lives and what happens in their individual lives. So when you start looking at it and you start driving down, last week, week before, in the NICU at Toledo Children's Hospital, 14 babies were addicted to heroin. So moms that delivered, they need to wean them off heroin. So those social conditions matter. The social conditions matter in trying to make communities better, trying to create better lives for people. And so from a healthcare perspective, at least from our system's perspective, we can do a lot for you clinically, but if we don't do some of the other social things, in our view, we're not doing our job. So what you have behind you is a map that really kind of shows these big green circles, and it shows at the top, it shows a clinical circle, and again, you depend on, you know, hospitals, Mercy, UT, ProMedica for good health care. As you go over, the importance of education can't be separated from a healthy person. So we all need to care about education, whether you went to a public school or a private school, incredibly important as far as the health of a community. We need to create opportunities for innovation. We need to create opportunities for people that have ideas, that have job opportunities, thoughts that they have, that we have an entrepreneur backbone to our communities where people can actually get the type of support services they need to develop companies and keep companies here local. And we've been doing a whole variety of things in that innovation space. Economic development, which is critically important, so you might wonder why a health system is interested in economic development. It's a very simple idea. Economic development, the best thing you can do for an individual is help them get a job. So again, if you think about growing communities, building communities, you want to help somebody out from a social basis in life, get them a job, get them benefits, help them move on in life. And so we spend a lot of time as a system looking at economic development. And again, every one of the communities we work in, what is ultimately key is that no one, there's no organization, there's no person, there's no institution that can do this alone. So this notion of public-private partnerships is absolutely key. So when you look at this wheel and we begin to look at some of the things that we're interested in, we've really gotten focused. If we start looking at the clinical space, and I will start with the social determinant space, we began starting to work in the area of hunger, for example. And it started with some work we did in obesity and got very, very interested in nutrition. And what happened was we created some maps with learning, and we put them in schools, and our trainers came back and said that all these kids are hungry. And so we went from obesity, even kids that were having weight problems, and it was this really fundamental lack of nutrition that a lot of these kids were having every day. So we became very interested in hunger. So now, by the end of the year, we will screen all our patients in our hospitals for food insecurity. 2 questions you can ask. And so now we try to work to provide short-term food needs to people through food pantries and food pharmacies where doctors can actually write a script. And if someone screens positive, we give them short-term food needs, and we try to put them in touch with agencies. They can continue to come back for more food if they do a pharmacy. We started a food reclamation project. We've reclaimed 200,000 pounds of food. That's food that's prepared but not served. Our biggest partner is Hollywood Casino. So at night, we have 2 people going to Hollywood Casino. They take food that's been prepared, not served, repackage it, and distribute it across the community. The first night we did that, we had leftover lobster, so the people at Cherry Street got leftover lobster for that evening. And we continue to do it. We just announced a national coalition with the AARP Foundation, who's very interested in seniors. And what we're working on now is a national basis, a national drive to try to make sure every patient in every physician office and every hospital is screened for food insecurity, and we've created a national organization to do it. Mental health. 60% of people in this country with a mental illness goes unserved, goes untreated. 60%. So when you look at all the money we spend in health care, fundamental needs like mental health have not been taken care of. It's just not been the fabric of American health care. Long reasons of why that's kind of evolved. Mental health is critically important, especially as we think of the health of our community. I mentioned infant mortality. The clinical piece, the partnering with schools, and again, the work that we can all do in our individual schools to make sure we have a solid community. There's a lot of great things going on in innovation. We started an innovation work a couple years ago. We built an incubator that's oversubscribed. We've had about 90 disclosures for patents. We've been awarded 6 or 8 patents. We have 2 companies that are in the process of relocating to Toledo for jobs. Again, the reason for that is trying to create economic development, trying to spur a culture of innovation in a community, and trying to move a community forward. These are all important buckets for every organization to think about relative to where they are in life. So this is just a slide from the Project for Public Spaces, and it's kind of the 10 things that you can think about for a vital community. And there's a couple buckets here: underlying ideas, kind of the planning, translating ideas, and implementation. And these are some of the things that we've been looking at relative to the 22nd Century Committee. And the first one is this notion that the community is the expert. So communities can change. If you look in this room and look at just the talent that's represented here, if you look at the assets in our community, the way communities change is not by a single person, but it's when a whole variety of people, committed people, get together and say, doggone it, stop bitching, we got to change something in our community. And really that's kind of the notion of what it should be. Lee Fisher spoke to one of our first meetings of the 22nd Century Committee, and he said, I have some news for you that'll surprise you. Toledo is no more negative or positive than Cleveland or Cincinnati or Columbus. He said the same people who say are negative in Columbus or negative in Cincinnati is the same core people in Toledo. And he said, I know what you're going to say, you're more negative, but you're not. I'm not sure I believe him, but anyway. But he was saying, his point was, every community has that aspects to it, that been here, done that, it's been tried before, woe is us. There's a great term called learned helplessness, and people, organizations, communities can learn to be helpless. And the flip side of learned helplessness is learned optimism, which you can also learn. And you can start to embed optimism in people and organizations and in the life of a community. There's a great study that was done a couple years ago. They asked a company, they asked all the employees to do a survey. And the survey was slanted so that at the end of the day, they had to ask questions and it made them reflect on something positive. Well, they did this study, and after a few months, people reported better health, better family relationships, better relationships at work, and a higher attitude about their jobs. All because what? They were thinking positively. And that's really kind of this whole spirit that we try to create. You're creating a place, not a design. Again, as we kind of look at communities and we look at how you build communities and how you try to lay out communities, it really is about thinking about how you design a community, the physical space, the connections, and how we kind of lay out, kind of what a master plan for the city is. We need a vital downtown. I'll talk a little bit about the architect we picked. And one of the things that impacted us when they were talking to us is they were saying that when you look at a map of cities, in order to create a vital city, you have to have enough density so people feel comfortable to walk. And as you look at it from an aerial view, you need about 60% density. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Are you going to walk down 5, 6 city blocks when you don't see anybody? And then you're starting to look around, and we've all had that experience in life. You feel unsafe. And so you need to fill in those gaps. And the cities that have created this walking city have filled in those gaps. So they would say that kind of like you kind of hope you have like 60 to 70%. Well, their view of Toledo, Ohio, was Toledo's footprint was filled in 20%. So you see part of the problem. And so part of the problem is how do you begin to fill in spaces, over a period of time where you really create this walkable city in a city where you would feel free to walk several city blocks to maybe go from a restaurant to a bar to a shop and just keep on walking down the street. So creating place is important. Goes without, I think, saying that you can't do it alone, so we need lots of partners. That kind of led to the formation initially of the 22nd century. A lot of people involved, a lot of private companies involved in making sure we get companies back at the table. This notion that every community has, and as Lee Fisher talked about, it can't be done here. Well, either we can just forget it and say, well, no, it can't be done here, we fail, or we can say, no, we can do it. We just got to rally the troops and figure out how we do it in a positive way. And that really is kind of the driver, I think, for 22nd century. There's no reason we can't do it here. Every time our area's decided to do something, they do it. They move a ball field, build Huntington, tackle different projects. It takes a little bit of bumpiness to get there, but you can do it. This notion about you can do a lot by observing. So, for example, a week ago, Steve Meadwell from the Metro Parks knew we were moving downtown. He said, can I meet you and take you on a walk downtown? And it's like, you want to do what? He said, I want to take you on a walk. So we started out at the farmer's market, and he showed me how you can't walk from the farmer's market to the new Middle Grounds Metro Park, to Owens Corning, to where we're going to locate by the steam plant. You can, but it's not easy. And you got to cross streets. And his point was, if we just, created some streets, put in some lighting, fixed the sidewalks, this would be one heck of a river walk and park walk and great downtown walk that would rival any city. And we can do it, we just got to connect some dots. So this notion of observing, some of it is really just a matter of making some observations and filling in some spaces. We all know about the value of vision. We all know that we need a shared purpose. We know data is important. Our architects told us a story about the Arena District in Columbus. So, Nationwide was going to build some housing downtown Columbus. They were planning to build a big housing development to get things kicked off. Someone said, well, we should do some analysis. We should get some data. So they did. They went through a big study. And the study came back and said there was a need for 5 housing units a year for the next 10 years. So that paralyzed them for 2 years. So for 2 years, nothing happened. And then finally somebody said, heck on this, we're going to do it anyway. And they did it, and Nationwide, the Arena District took off from there. So sometimes it is this notion of starting to step out, take some risks, having a vision for the future. We all know that form follows function. So again, we need to make sure we understand how we want a downtown to work. And again, in any city in America, the pivoting point of a city like Toledo is the river. And everything flows to the river. So even in some of the initial looks at Toledo, the streets don't flow to the river. There's no public space on the river. And there's no connections to the river. And again, they're saying any other community would die to have this natural asset. You just haven't done it. So again, from a function standpoint, we need to make that happen. Triangulate is just this notion of getting people together. It's the old connecting of the dots, strength of weak ties, if you remember the whole notion of weak ties and how that bound together is incredibly strong. It's getting people that haven't talked to each other before to talk to each other now. So when we talked to Mayor Collins about appointing the original 22nd century, he immediately said, I get it. There is no vision collective today for Toledo that we all own together. Let's do it. Sadly, he passed away, but Mayor Paula Hicks Hudson picked it up, very exuberant around it, said, I agree, let's go. And so we were able to form the committee and move forward, and I'll talk about it a little bit. They always think about in terms of starting with quick wins. Every time you get people together, the first thing is, let's plant flowers. So that always seems to make sense. Let's plant some flowers, let's do that. But the notion of, in any of these sort of projects, you look for quick wins. You know, in Pittsburgh, they put up some really ornamental bike racks so people could visibly see, if you've been to the waterfront in Pittsburgh and see what they've done. They just did some things to get people's attention to say, something's different. These people are doing something, so we've been talking a little bit about that. Money is never the issue. As much as we think it's all about money, it really, really isn't. We'll figure it out. You know, what happens in every community that our consultants talk about, it starts out with a little bit of public money, and then very quickly a small public investments gets taken over by the private sector. So you need a little bit of public money to get things kicked off. But in every community that's been vital, it's the private money that's followed the public money. And there's no reason, again, that that can't be the case here. And the other point is you're never finished. So we know that. So you keep working at it. And part of the idea behind the 22nd Century Committee was to have an ongoing group that's going to own a master plan and keep things going. So in the past, there are master plans. There are people that will say, what do you mean there's not a master plan? We have several of them, and they're on a shelf somewhere. The problem is multiple administrations with a different view in the city of Toledo, and there's never been an ownership of the private sector. So the notion of the 22nd Century Committee is to get some private ownership of a plan. So a little bit in our ideas. So again, as ProMedica's grown, we have people in about 20 different locations. We decided for all the right reasons, efficiency, putting people together culturally, we really needed to put people closer together. And we just decided instead of going to a greenfield site, we would go to a one site. And instead of going to suburbia, the trend across the country is to go back downtowns. I think Thaman talked to you this morning. I'm sure he talked about kind of, as we look at the younger workforce and the people wanting to live and work downtown, it's clearly the trend in a lot of communities. We see that in a lot of major communities. And so this notion is you need jobs and you need people downtown, and that's how we change it. So we've been through this process. Again, we looked at adding to existing facilities, clinical facilities. We looked at greenfield sites. And really what our board said is, the right thing to do is to go downtown for all the right reasons. So we have this great building downtown, the steam plant. It's amazing to look at the footprint and the history of Toledo. You talk about horizontal cities and vertical cities. Toledo was a vertical city at one point. Had high rises, had people, had industry, a lot of people on the street. People came there to shop. So they were true, horizontal and a vertical city. And really, we have this wonderful building, the steam plant that was built in the 1890s that has sat empty today. That's a picture of the interior. And for those of you that have never been in there, the reason the steel is there is so it doesn't fall down. And the delicacy of developing that building is to take that steel down to kind of keep the walls in place. So the building on the right, the steam plant, is a Daniel Burnham building. So Daniel Burnham is the architect of Chicago. Burnham is, Chicago World's Fair, high rises in this country, skyscrapers. Burnham had a lot to do with it. For those of you that read books, Devil in the White City is Daniel Burnham's story. As well as the mass murderer during the Chicago World's Fair. That story. It's a great book. So the Chicago World's Fair actually fed into the mass murderer because all these people came to Chicago. They're making a movie. So anyway, it's a great book. So this is a Burnham building, classic Renaissance building. Has sat empty for 30 plus years. It was built in the 1890s. And it would have been a shame if it fell down. It would have been a shame if it didn't get used. So in thinking about how do you turn, a space into a public space, our notion was that's a great empty building. You take that in the Key Bank, and Key Bank was downsizing in Toledo. So 2 buildings, not exactly the same architecture and the same look, but we did our groundbreaking a couple weeks ago. We went through a process to get it zoned and had a little bit of controversy with it. And now we're in the process of developing these 2 buildings. The building on your left is just a great open space. We're hoping that the bottom floor is partially retail. And so this notion, again, of retail, not that we're not going to do the retail, but again, it's a walkable city. How to get people walking from one Seagate to the new hotel that's coming, to a restaurant, or to maybe some other development that might go to around the corner to Hensville. How do you create all that? How do you create that walkable city? So again, if we can get developers and the right people to create those spots, you can begin to start to map out in your minds how you could create a walkable Toledo, and that's part of that. What's interesting about historic, so as we looked at this building, it has a lot of historic tax credits. And so what they don't want you to do in a historic building is to match. So we're adding an addition onto the back of the building. It's been beat up. It's not historic any longer, so we're building off the back. And they don't want you to match it, so it does look different, and that's the reason. I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought we should match it, but they go, no, you clearly need to make sure that you see the historic versus the non-historic. Keeping the windows, keeping the stacks, kind of this notion of these great big windows, this great space. Great place to see the fireworks off the back, I think, when that happens. And so really what we'd like to do is to really create this whole kind of, river walk that's, kind of the type of things that we would want in lots of communities. And this is just, again, just kind of an idea of just what it looks like from the top. Kind of park space, we're already talking about kind of this party in the park return and what we might be able to do here on Fridays in the summers. And this will house about 1,000 of our people. In Toledo, in about 20 plus locations, we have about 2,200 people today. So the next issue for us is we would like to bring the other 1,000 plus downtown. We just got to figure out, we have some ideas where that would work, but where we would go. One of the things, we did have a little controversy about a parking, and part of the parking idea was if we don't have parking for the first 1,000, we're going to get a lot worse with the next 1,000. So it's an underground subsurface parking. For those of you that have been in cities that have seen that, we've got some waterfall, bubbling water type things for kids and things that will be part of that. And really the notion is to be able to walk out, park on Summit. We'd love to see it convert to diagonal parking so you can have more parking and begin to walk out. Love to see a Starbucks down there. We're trying to work on that. They don't want to come downtown. And really try to get this notion of what we might be able to do. So you can kind of see, you have this urban look, kind of a Millennium Park feel a little bit. Some landscape connector, an event lawn at the bottom. And again, over the weekends, and so it'll be great public space because you'll be able to park and walk right onto the water. So we think it would be really, really good. And that's what we envision it to look like. And I think maybe you've seen these pictures in the paper. We have turned the top of the parking, which you can do by also making an event area. So you can do an event area on top of there. So this is how you create, though, you turn a space into a public-private space. So yes, we're going to use it for our own uses, but again, that park area and our agreements with the city is to turn that into a public space. And so with the public space, with a connector along the river, our hope is, with some other things happening, that this will be a place that people will be attracted to, and we hope to be able to create events to that. Putting a projection screen on the side. We'll see if Joe Napoli will let us broadcast Mud Hen games there or something like that. And again, the retail will be here on the first level, so you get an idea. But the notion, again, is as you look at space, you look at other communities on the right-hand side, parking decks that are converted into, spaces that people use, using parking decks, in a whole variety of ways to make them attractions. And really, just thinking in terms of what these kind of projects can mean for a downtown and where you go. What's interesting is, a lot of people go, you're spending a lot of money on this. And actually, when you start looking at how this works for us, it works really well. So we're selling buildings, getting out of leases, and relocating. And so on an operating basis, it actually saves us money. And so it adds a lot to the tax rolls of the city of Toledo, provides tax revenue, economic benefit, creates new jobs, which is all great. So we're going to, we got the property for the garage. The city's going to put in some infrastructure. We asked them to improve the tunnel system a little bit to make that look better. Jobs Ohio gave us a $2 million grant, gave us a $4 million no-interest loan. We got other grants for road improvements. The Ohio Department Service Agency got $5 million in historic tax credits. We got an application for historic tax credits, $4.2 million, and we're pursuing some other things. The point here is I'm on the Third Frontier board, and there's a lot of projects for Cincinnati. There's a lot of projects for Columbus, a lot of projects for Cleveland. And so when I give them a hard time about do you know where Toledo is, their response is, well, you don't take advantage of these sort of things when you have an opportunity. So other cities have taken advantage of these sort of opportunities. They've taken advantage of opportunities for funds from Third Frontier and others. And I think what's good about what we're seeing in Toledo through the Chamber and through Richard Hyland in the Chamber and everything else we're seeing a lot of people that are much more interested and much more engaged in taking advantage of these things. And there's just our timeline. So the 22nd Century Committee was really kind of modeled after what we've seen in several other communities. In Cincinnati, it's the 3C DC group. If you go to University Circle in Cleveland, they have a group. And really, they are mostly private in nature. They are, I would call them, strategic real estate development corps. And so in many cases, what businesses have come to do privately is to pool funds and buy real estate that they are concerned about getting developed properly. They don't develop it, so they just make sure it gets developed properly. So if a building is empty and it's in disrepair, they would buy it and keep it and work with qualified developers to make sure it gets developed right. They would buy buildings out of land banks. And they would also then be able to also look for opportunities, to try to do community-type projects together in partnership with the city. So that model has existed. So one track we're going down is the creation of our own development corp. We're in current discussions with the current development corp about how that might change. And so the notion would be have an ongoing group of companies that you see listed up here that would be involved in this downtown organization. I don't think that's existed in Toledo for a few decades. So the good news is all of these organizations that you would know have said, we're in, we get it. The only way we're going to make things better is to work together. So that is probably one of the most positive things. Richard's on this committee with us. And what's exciting about it is they've come to the meetings. So, what we've been doing is we've got our start. We've had one group working on this development corp. We did pick an architect. As you see over on the right-hand side, we hired MKSK and HKS. MKSK are the folks who did the Arena District. They've done work in Louisville and Pittsburgh. They're the folks that we've hired to do our plan. They're underway. They plan to have a downtown storefront where people will be invited to drop in, give comments, look at ideas, give us input into the plan. There'll be a whole variety of community engagement opportunities, both from visioning sessions, strategic sessions, these downtown open houses, and then ultimately get a creation of a plan. And the idea of that is rather than just take the plan and say, okay, we're done, is the 22nd Century Committee, and we'll probably add other people as time goes along, will own the plan. So you got a development corp, you got a private group that's going to own the plan, and so on an ongoing basis, they're going to be the ones that are going to lobby, cajole, do whatever they can to try to make sure that this plan gets done and moves forward. So, everything that we've seen from the 22nd Century Committee has been positive. We're going to do our first press conference here in a few weeks and talk a bit more publicly. We'll announce, our selection of an architect, so you're hearing it early today. We'll have the architects available for media to meet. We'll announce our downtown, storefront where people can start to give us input. And shortly after that, around the same time, we'll launch our development corporation, which will be these companies, and we'll talk about how we're going to do that and the structure in place for that. So very exciting. We think it's a good next step in the development of Toledo and a good move forward. Kind of in summary today, when you want to turn public spaces into vital civic spots, it starts with a vision. Don't ever say it can't be done here, because we're going to prove them differently. We all need to work together. We're the experts. No one can do it together, or no one can do it alone. It's all about us working together. So we're really excited and look forward to coming back another time and share some of our accomplishments. So thank you very much.